Joseph Diedrich. Is it you?
It's me.
Oh, I'm so pleased to see you. Thank you for
Oh, you as
joining me
well.
tonight. No, it's been too long. An immense amount of time, right?
Like what? 2 hours? 3 hours?
Well, I mean, it's been, yeah. How long since we've hung out together?
Since we've been in the same city, probably ISFLC, right?
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. So I'm going to just quickly grab this YouTube link and share it out. I think it might have. Okay. So we're celebrating the appearance of of your of your newest guide. So I hope you'll introduce this to us and everything. First of all, how are you? Everything going well in Wisconsin?
Yeah, it's a beautiful day outside. Everything's going well. It's about 75 degrees and sunny, and so I was outside for quite a bit today. I have a beautiful terrace right along the lake down at the student union. So
Do
spent
you
some
think
time
do you think is it your opinion that 75-degree weather in June in Wisconsin makes up for 25 and 30 and 45 below, in February?
there. Well, I much prefer it, obviously. I'm not. I don't like skiing. I don't like snowboarding. I don't like snow angels. I don't like snowmen. I don't like snowballs. But I don't have any other place that I would rather live than where I'm living right now in Madison, Wisconsin.
That's wonderful. And you're working in the legal profession, obviously. So, but also have a deep attachment to liberty, and you're kind of a progenitor of what I would consider the sort of the new libertarianism in many ways, of which your new guide on Liberty.me is a brilliant example. Seeking to find liberty in 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 unusual places. So can you describe to me like what inspired your monograph and what led you to write it?
Absolutely. Um, Actually, so it's the name of the guide. First of all, is Find Liberty in Unexpected Places, and it's available now in the Liberty.me library. Um, if you'll notice, the cover art on the guide is a martini glass. It's a collection of short essays, which in itself I think is sort of representative of what it's all about. It's small digestible pieces. It's not you don't have to get bogged down on it. You can consume it in a way that hopefully is enjoyable to consume. I mean, sometimes, especially as libertarians, we talk about reading treatises and books and things that were, you know, written in universities 120 years ago, and that's all fine and well. Um, but there's also a lot of practical value to short, easy to digest pieces of information, and that's the way the guide is assembled. It's a collection of short essays that I wrote over some time, actually. The dates of when I wrote the individual essays I don't think appear in the guide, but it was probably a period of about 4 years that I wrote these
It was
things
a period
together.
of great discovery for you personally, right? I mean, we were going through a strategic upheaval within sort of the space of human liberty, having lost faith in politics, doubtful about the merit of unrelenting seminars, and there was a new ethos that suggested that we should get out and do things, and a lot of your essays appeared in that the prime of that period, and now you see history sort of conforming, to a sort of do-it-yourself libertarianism.
I think that's right, and I think that that's really one of two core sort of ideas ideas that the guide hopefully gets across, and the one is that it's about getting out there and doing it, not even with libertarianism in mind. It's about getting out there and doing something in large part for the sake of doing something for yourself, doing something for others, to better yourself and to better others, irrespective of politics. And then the other part of the guide, or the other part of the, as you call it, the ethos that I'm trying to embody here, and that's positivity. It's not, every essay in this guide is hopefully intended to be completely positive. It's supposed to uplift you, and it's supposed to make you feel good about the future and hopeful for the future after you read it. It's supposed to have the exact opposite effect when you close the last page of 1984.
Which is a very dreary book at some level. I mean, it just and reflective of Orwell's own outlook, which was that essentially there was no hope for humanity. But you know, he was wrong, and why do you suppose that is wrong? Actually, what's wrong with that sort of pessimism? Actually,
well, for one, it's not helpful to anybody. It's not helpful on a personal level. I mean, yes, I've read 1984 and I enjoyed it as an interesting piece of literature. But when you set it down, it's dreadful. It's depressing. And how does that, outside of a piece of literature, it's not helpful to me personally, and it's not helpful to society. And even if Orwell or anybody else shares those sort of pessimistic views about the future, outside of sort of a, like I said, a commentary, a piece of literature, it really serves no purpose. And I think that where people have gone wrong, libertarians especially, is that they use things like 1984 and they think that they serve more of a purpose than just literature, than just commentary. They take that and that becomes their entire outlook on life, that becomes their entire outlook on society. And in turn, they become people that are difficult to be around, people that are difficult to share ideas with. You know, and I think, as you alluded to, liberty, or at least there's a number of people in the liberty space today that are trying to reverse that trend and do something about it.
I think it's a substantial change, and that's why I think your monograph is serious and important, because it sort of captures a new strategic outlook, and it's not just strategic; it's almost psychological and spiritual, really. It reaches to the core of like what it is we're trying to do. You know, what is the purpose of learning about liberty, and what do we do with the knowledge we've acquired? You know, is it solely to change the political system? Solely, yes, that's part of it, right? But is that all it's about? Is there any more about the ideas of liberty that can inform our lives, that goes beyond politics?
Well, you know, I think there has been, in addition to a sort of change in ethos, there really is something that we have to mention, and we might as well mention it right away, that there's been a societal change sort of in the past really 5 years that has made the positive outlook not only possible but practical. And for the first time in human history, distributed technology is economically and technologically feasible. Not just things like Bitcoin. I mean, we're talking about from 3D printing to microfinance to crowdsourcing. For the first time in human history, we can do things on a massive scale but at the local level. And I think that ties right in with sort of the ethos of the positive outlook in the future and the sort of the entrepreneurial spirit. It's all part and parcel of the same. So I think to some degree we needed both for this change to really take place. There's the freedom within, and then there's the sort of the objective freedom too that exists in the world. And we needed both, and I think we finally have both.
Well, you know, I've played around with this idea a lot myself, and it's slightly shocking to me. In fact, I'm giving a talk this weekend at Voice and Exit. I wish you could be there, where I'm trying to like explain exactly what you said, like what makes our times different. I mean, what is it about distributed ledger technology that is so epic, so revolutionary, so game-changing for us as a civilization? And I spent a lot of time this weekend sort of thinking through this really carefully because I have to present it to a popular audience, right? And there's nothing like the demand that you boil down this stuff for a popular audience that helps you think about it so clearly. So let me just just ask you, I mean, what precisely would you say about our modern, the most modern technology that makes it sort of substantively different from anything we've experienced before?
It's a difficult question. I'm very tempted to say the internet. I'll go back to 1984, and we think about 1984, and the wonderful thing is that not only has 1984 not happened, but we've reached a point now where it's impossible that it could ever happen. A huge part of the success of INCSOC, of the party, is their dependence on a record that they can control and that they can change at will. And it's a physical record. We no longer have a physical record. And so not only is 1984 not likely, it's actually impossible. And so maybe it's the cloud. Maybe it's not the internet. Maybe it's the cloud.
Which really means,
to the extent that there's a real difference between that, but
well, the cloud is the evolution of the internet, right? I mean, it's just the next iteration. But it's not just single nodes living in, or centralized nodes living in the cloud. It really is about the universal sharing of information itself. And you know, you and I have, yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about this subject together, you know, in cocktail parties and, you know, online. We're still working on, you know, the great essay concerning scarcity. You know, I still feel like the ultimate treatise on the subject is yet to be written, you know. But it all comes down to the sort of the magic of information itself, and its capacity for, you know, like infinite distribution and malleability, and or in the case of the blockchain, it's immutability itself, right? I mean, to unleash this as the single most valuable asset in the world has changed everything, wouldn't you say?
well, I think you're right. I think when we talk about things like scarcity, I think it gets at the core of it is that information and the distribution of information exists wholly outside of the physical world. And I'm sure throughout history somebody has realized that all along. But now everybody can realize it because they don't need that physical, that what in copyright law would be called fixation. There's no necessity of fixation, physical fixation anyway. I mean, yes, you can fixate into a digital file, but everybody really understands that now firsthand and as an individual. It's not some abstract concept that information is different from the physical medium in which it resides. we can all understand that now just by living our daily lives.
That's a fascinating distinction because, the more you play around with these ideas, the more you realize nothing really has substantially changed. I mean, the Gutenberg Bible is part physical and part informational, right?
Nothing is different. It's always that's why like you say the treatise is yet to be written, because you have to synthesize this all and say and realize that yes, it's always been the same. Nothing is fundamentally changed. What's changed is everybody realizes it because it's part and parcel of their daily life now. It's not some abstract thought that you have to drink 5 Negronis to think about. It's every day when I play with my iPhone. It's every day when I go onto Facebook. It's every day when I stream an episode of Game of Thrones illegally from God knows where. It's part of our daily life now.
Well, that is really fascinating. I think that does define the difference. I mean, it is intriguing when you look back at the history of ideas, how few people in history have ever seriously thought about this subject, right? The crucial difference between the world of scarcity and the world of non-scarcity. How could we have gone through 500 years of economic theory and never have seen anybody really explore this in depth? I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it?
It is, and this could be very much an inside joke between us, but I mean, we've gotten down to the nitty-gritty of this, and I still don't know if I completely understand it. I mean, there's always a hitch in the system. There's always thinking about what separates information from everything else. There's always sort of a hitch at the very end, and you have to constantly remind yourself that no, it's about getting way too esoteric. No, it's about reproducibility, not infiniteness.
Really? I mean, are you sure? I mean, okay. Yeah, I take that because infinite is a word I use often when describing information. Why can't we talk about infinite reproducibility? Is this just too inside baseball? This is getting a little.
It might be. I don't know who's on this. I don't know who's watching, but.
Well, everybody's going to watch this forever, so
the critical distinction, I think, for me, isn't in infinite. So let's take a step back and so we actually say what we're talking about. We're talking about scarcity as a property of something that exists in the world, and whether or not that's a basis in economic theory and property theory for distinguishing information from first physical things, but not limited to physical things. And the thing that I always imagine is, we can say that the supply of gold in the world is scarce. And for most practical purposes, we could say that we know it's scarce because there's a finite supply. I mean, if we talk, in economics, there might be a slightly different definition, but as far as getting down to the actuality of it, a finite supply would certainly mean that the gold is a scarce resource. But what if we imagine, and this is to the extent I understand it, I mean, in physics there's a theory that the universe goes on and on infinitely forever. And so it's theoretically possible that there is an infinite supply of gold in the universe. And what really then matters is whether an individual unit of gold is infinite. And the only way to determine that is by looking at reproducibility. And I think you're the one that actually originally brought this to my attention.
Well, you mean the subject of reproducibility itself? Yeah,
Well, and using that as a metric for scarcity, or that
I,
as a necessary condition for scarcity.
I believe that this is true. In fact, this is what I'm going to be talking about at Voice at Exit this weekend, is this subject of reproducibility. And, well, by the way, it's not just reproducibility itself. For example, I could take this glass um, and, presumably, if I had the equipment, I could reproduce it at a later time, right?
Simultaneous. It has to be simultaneous, instantaneous, reproducible.
How many times, my friend?
An infinite number. But if it's simultaneously and instantaneously, the infinite is implied. I don't think we actually have to say it again because it's redundant.
Okay.
I mean, it's not wrong, but the problem then, if we say it in that context, is the confusion that comes in then when we think about physical goods as being scarce because there's a finite supply of them.
Right.
Which really doesn't have any bearing on the ultimate question of scarcity. The question of scarcity is answered at the margin.
Well, I really think it comes down to a matter of control, right? So, or I should say exclusive control. If you can be the exclusive controller, master of some resource, then it's necessarily scarce. If you cannot be, then it's non-scarce. And if you cannot be, that means that other people can simultaneously control that same resource without limit, which implies simultaneous reproducibility. So it's all a matter of whether it's all a matter of control, it seems to me.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit on that one. What if I have an idea in my head that I have not shared with anybody else in the world, and let's assume in this situation that nobody else in the world has thought of this ever in the past or in the present. Don't I have exclusive control over that thing? Maybe not. Maybe because somebody else could independently think of it.
Conceptually. Yeah. And certainly once you leak that information out, it's infinitely reproducible. So
Right.
So no, I would not say that as a matter of principle you have exclusive control over your thoughts. Absolutely not.
What as a sort of separate question, what do you mean when you say control? Do you mean the ability to use, to transfer, to destroy, to exclude? All of those things?
Everything that comes along with that. Yeah, to depreciate, to exclude others from controlling my resource, to have the same resource I have at the same time, perhaps. So the point isn't so much control; it's the exclusivity of control that would define scarcity. It seems to me. Of course, well, it raises the question: are there scarce resources that are not exclusively controllable? And yes, there probably are. So, I mean, again, this stuff is very elusive and a little bit difficult. Nonetheless, I'm pretty convinced that there is a strict dividing line between scarce and non-scarce in the world. How you define it can get a little bit difficult. And I think the point you're trying to make is that the more we port out of the realm of scarcity into the realm of non-scarcity, the more we experience opportunity and choice and something ever more approaching utopia.
But going back to something we said earlier, are we really approaching anything? I mean, has the paradigm of scarce to non-scarce really changed at all?
Well, you know to put it more precisely, it's that we're ever more reliant on the non-scarce realm as a feeder mechanism to make our daily lives function in ways that are ever more to our liking. And whereas in the past we were more dependent on scarce resources than we are now. I mean, once you get once you start living off your applications, mobile applications, instead of like physical maps or that sort of thing. Yeah, then you have migrated actually out of the realm of scarcity into the realm of non-scarcity. I would say that's true. Yeah.
Well, moving from physical maps to Google Maps, it takes us from the physical world to the non-physical world. But what have we gained in terms of, what have we net gained in terms of non-scarcity?
Well, we've gained the possibility of an infinite simultaneous distribution of that service, whereas before only people who had access to the physical map could have it. Now all you need is a dumb network, and you can get an infinite array of smart applications out of it. Whereas before, we had to have smart networks that delivered a limited supply of physical applications.
There's a part of it that to me is still scarce, though. I haven't thought about this in depth enough, and I'm sure you've thought about it more than I have. But there's still aspects of the network that are scarce.
Oh well, yeah, and yeah, I agree with that.
And I mean, applications take up space, even if it's just within the set, even if it's just within the conceptual set.
Yeah, I don't think it will ever entirely escape the realm of scarcity. It's always going to be persistent and be bundled with non-scarcity. I guess my point is that, thanks to technological improvement, I think I'm making your point, actually, as far as I can tell from your guide, within the realm of the things we use, the non-scarce things are becoming ever more determinative of our life quality, essentially. And those are infinitely distributable.
Well, if nothing else, we're becoming much more aware of it.
Yeah. Well, can you give me some examples from your guide that that are your favorites?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, the cover art is a martini glass, and that's an allusion to what I'm just looking at the guide here. It looks like it's the second to last essay in the guide, called Spontaneous Order in the Cocktail Lounge. And I don't know if you remember this essay or not, Jeffrey, but it's about a guy who goes to a bar with some friends and orders an interesting drink, and sooner or later everybody at the table has one because they tried his and they liked it. But he didn't order it for them. He didn't suggest they order it. All he did was set an example, and people's natural curiosity got the best of them. And it's a perhaps not so subtle allegory to what I think the sort of strategy for spreading freedom is, and that's simply to set an example, and others will follow. I think at a certain, even if this doesn't make sense, I think the spirit of it is right, and that's once you call yourself a libertarian, you cease being a libertarian. Once you identify as part of this amorphous sort of group, I think you lose a little bit about what it's supposed to mean to be a libertarian and to be free.
So have you turned against libertarianism to some extent as a movement?
I don't know if I did any turning. I think I may have done some realizing, and yes, I realized that I don't like the concept of a movement, it always kind of scratched at my brain a little bit. But now I realize for once and for all that I don't like the concept of a movement. I think it's terrible. I think libertarian philosophy, the philosophy of freedom, the concept of people being both subjectively free, and this is what I was trying to get at earlier too. To be free, you need to be subjectively and objectively free. You need to be free within yourself, and you need to live in a society that allows you to do that. You need to be objectively free too. And I think for a lot of people, the hardest part is the subjective freedom. And I think being a part of a political movement, I think, takes some of that away from you, at least in spirit.
Yeah, and especially a political movement without any particular sort of driving goal. By the way, I'm echoing. You hear that?
Yeah, your audio is a little funky.
Okay, I'm concerned about this. Most of the time, Google Hangouts is amazing. Every once in a while, it falls apart. I would leave. I think I start the broadcast. So if I take it down now, so you just go ahead.
Okay, I think you'll be just fine, Jeffrey. Some of the other highlights of the guide. The first essay in the guide is called "Everything I Know About Economics I Learned from Tinder." It's a little bit kitschy. It's kind of based on a true story. I mean, by the way, I met my lovely girlfriend on Tinder. I enjoyed Tinder very much, and I found that it embodied a lot of sort of basic economic lessons, and that would be a sort of a prime example of what I mean by finding liberty in unexpected places. The second essay in the guide is called "My Tiny Cosmopolitan Apartment." One day I was looking around my apartment and realized that I have an entire world of things right inside my 500 square feet. I have coffee from Brazil. I have sheets from Egypt. I have a painting that was made in China. I have things from everywhere, and they're all collected right in my little universe. And that's only possible with freedom. That's only possible with trade and freedom. Notice I don't have anything in my apartment from Cuba or North Korea, which is terribly sad. There's an essay in here about the TV show Community, which is one of my favorites. It talks about sort of professional licensing and issues with the education system. In another essay, I analogize Twix candy bars to political parties. I love playing golf. One of the essays talks about how golf embodies a lot of sort of ideas of freedom. Talks about how golf is compared to, say, football. It's very, very self-regulating, and you could go out on the golf course, for instance, and you could tee up your shots from the fairway, or you could play 5 balls on every hole and count only half your strokes, and nobody would come and arrest you, but nobody would play with you. You wouldn't be part of the social system anymore. People would avoid you. You wouldn't have friends on the golf course anywhere. And I think that's a lesson in itself. The cocktail lounge essay, and then at the end, it's the final essay is about chamber music. When you think about an orchestra with a director, it's much more militaristic than watching a chamber ensemble. They look at each other, and without a conductor, they make, in my opinion, much better music than an orchestra.
This is a
Do you have a good
controversial
chamber
opinion.
ensemble recording?
We could talk about this
Yeah.
all night.
I mean, solo music highlights the talent of an individual, but it lacks sort of a depth of character that an ensemble brings out. Chamber ensemble, it showcases a richer sound, but then on the other hand, like I said, a large orchestra, it connotes sort of a regimented militarism. And so I think the chamber ensemble is the perfect sort of libertarian ensemble. But I'd love to hear your counter to
that. Can you hear me? Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, you're just fine, I think.
I'm going to unplug this. No, you know, I think it's not my microphone. I think it's just the way the thing is worked. But you know, I'm not actually counting. But because I've sung in Minnesota without directors, and I've conducted those ensembles in a way that I help them aspire to not have. So, but nonetheless, I guess my view of this is that this takes us away from politics. And that's has implications for libertarian doctrine. I personally have no problem with that, but it is a revisit.
I mean, isn't the whole goal of tonight to take us away from politics?
Good point. Touche. Yeah.
I mean it. I really only mean it as a metaphor for how large groups of individuals can create something wonderful together without central direction. That's really what I mean by it. It's very much a metaphor, very much an allegory.
Yeah, and yet it speaks to a certain truth. I mean, like a core truth about the capacity of humanity to spontaneously organize.
Go on.
Well, you know, I do have microphone problems. We should probably end this after you because I can't actually speak without. In fact, let me turn down this thing. So I don't think it's. I think we've got some troubleshooting going on here. I don't think it's headphones. I think it's just Google. But just so we should probably comment. One of the things about our community, Liberty.me, is that it tends to be self-police. So we have trolls join all the time. I mean, they pay the money. You know, but everybody ignores them. They go and because they don't become part of the community. And if you're not part of the community, you lose your value. And nobody cares about you. So I see in Liberty.me. Evidence of spontaneous voting. Yeah. So Joe. I'm gonna call it just because we've got a bad connection. I think I'm gonna blame Google connection. Sometimes technology flakes out. We're always creating, never finished. But thank you so much for your guide and so charming. And see you again.
Well, thank you very much for publishing my guide and for having me on tonight. It was, despite all audio problems to the contrary, it was a wonderful time. So.
Well, I hope to see you in Madison really soon. Or Milwaukee, as circumstances allow. All the best to you, my friend.
You too. Have a wonderful night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.